The soft hum of jazz floated through the luxury suit store as Vincent slipped his arms into sleeves of finely tailored jacket. The mirror reflected the image of a man who looked every bit the successful so, confident, composed, unbothered. But beneath the silken stitches, his mind raced. Today wasn't just about trying on a new collection. Today, Vincent was shopping undercover, observing his own staff, blending in as any other wealthy customer. Then he heard it. Two voices, low and hurried, drifted from the fitting room just behind him. "I swear, if he cuts our hours again, I'm done. Rent's already eating me alive," one whispered, the edge of desperation curling every word. "He doesn't care about us. To guys like that, we're invisible," the other replied bitterly. Vincent froze mid-button. Invisible? He tilted his head slightly, pretending to admire his reflection, but every nerve sharpened as their words sunk deep. They didn't know the boss was just feet away, and for the first time, Vincent wasn't sure if he was ready to hear what came next. Vincent Hale never thought he'd own a chain of luxury men's suit stores. Growing up in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, tailored suits belonged to another universe. A world where people dined at rooftop restaurants and spoke softly about business mergers over glasses of scotch. His father worked double shifts at a factory. His mother cleaned office buildings at night. They taught Vincent to work hard, keep his head down, and, above all, never forget where he came from. But somewhere along the line, success had blurred that last part. Now in his early 40s, Vincent was the CEO of Hale & Company, a sleek, high-end brand known for its precision tailoring and elite clientele. The flagship store in downtown Chicago was a cathedral of glass and polished wood, with lighting that made every fabric glow like art. Sales associates, impeccably dressed in slim-fit suits, glided across the floor with practiced grace. Everything about the store whispered luxury and distance, and lately, Vincent felt that distance everywhere. It had been years since he worked the floor, greeting customers and pinning hems. Years since he shared lunch breaks with the staff or asked how their kids were doing. As the company expanded, so did the gap between him and the people who helped build it. Now, profit reports and quarterly projections filled his days. Meetings about supply chains and international markets blurred one into the next. But last month, when an anonymous employee survey landed on his desk, Vincent couldn't ignore the words scribbled in the margins. "Management only cares about the bottom line. We're overworked and underpaid. There's no loyalty here anymore." That cut deeper than he expected. So, today, Vincent decided to do something no one saw coming. No press, no boardroom, just him, dressed down in jeans and a simple blazer, walking into his own store as if he were any other customer. He wanted to see what his employees said when they weren't looking at the CEO. He wanted to feel what it was like to be on the floor again, unnoticed. Only a few of his longtime managers still recognized him without a suit and tie. Gerald, the store's lead stylist and one of Vincent's first hires, offered him a knowing nod but kept his distance. They had agreed. Today, Vincent was just another shopper. But as the soft hum of conversation filled the store, and he overheard the quiet frustrations of the very people who kept his empire running, Vincent realized this visit wasn't just about reconnecting with the ground floor. It might be about saving the soul of his company. Or, at the very least, saving himself from becoming the kind of boss his parents warned him about. Vincent lingered by the full-length mirror, pretending to assess the fit of the jacket, while the conversation behind the dressing room curtain deepened. "I heard Rachel's hours got slashed last week," the first voice said. 4 shifts down to 2. She's barely scraping by. Vincent's stomach tightened. Rachel. He remembered hiring her 2 years ago. Bright smile, single mom, relentless work ethic. "Yeah, and for what?" the second voice replied. "So corporate can save a few bucks? They act like we're disposable. I swear, if the boss ever set foot in here, maybe he'd see we're real people." The curtain rustled, and Vincent instinctively turned away, heart pounding as if he'd been caught eavesdropping on a confession not meant for his ears. But they hadn't noticed him. Why would they? To them, he was just another well-off customer shopping for another overpriced suit. As the two employees stepped out, both young, wearing the store's signature all-black attire and name tags that Vincent immediately committed to memory, he watched them head toward the stockroom, shoulders hunched, faces exhausted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Hale and Company was built on the promise of craftsmanship and community. Vincent used to believe that treating employees like family was what separated his brand from the cold, corporate grind of the retail world. Somewhere along the way, that promise had been lost, traded for sleek ad campaigns, expansion deals, and quarterly profit margins. And now here was the truth, spoken in whispers behind fitting room doors. His people felt abandoned. Vincent adjusted his cufflinks, a growing sense of discomfort settling into his chest. He had come here today hoping to prove the survey wrong, maybe even to reassure himself that the complaints were exaggerated. But these weren't anonymous words on paper. These were real voices, real struggles. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if his company's foundation was as solid as he thought. Then Gerald quietly approached from the side. "Find something you like?" he asked with a slight grin, but his eyes held something deeper, a cautious curiosity, as if he knew Vincent had heard more than he was meant to. Vincent nodded slowly, gaze still fixed on the hallway where the two employees had disappeared. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "I think I just found exactly what I needed." It wasn't a jacket or a suit. It was a wake-up call. And as the thought solidified, so did a decision. This undercover visit wouldn't end with him walking out the door and pretending everything was fine. No, this was the moment Vincent realized he had to step back into the business. Not as a CEO perched in a high-rise office, but as a leader his people deserved. Before it was too late, Vincent didn't leave the store that day. Not right away. He thanked Gerald for fitting, made an excuse about needing to browse a little longer, and wandered to the showroom, his mind spinning. Every detail of the store he once obsessed over, the lighting angles, the imported marble floors, the subtle background music, felt irrelevant now. What mattered were the people moving quietly between the racks, heads down, eyes weary. By the time he left, he wasn't thinking about suits. He was thinking about what came next. The next morning, Vincent arrived at the flagship store 2 hours before opening. The city was still wiping the sleep from its streets, and the winter air bit through his coat as he fumbled with the key. He hadn't opened this store himself in years. He used to love the quiet moments before the first customer stepped through the door, back when it was just him and Gerald steaming jackets, setting out ties, making sure every hanger was perfectly spaced. Those days felt a lifetime ago. Inside, he turned on the lights and walked the floor alone. His reflection caught in the mirror again, but this time he barely glanced at it. Instead, he thought about Rachel, the single mom fighting to make ends meet with slashed hours, and the two employees whispering in the fitting room about whether their jobs even mattered. By 8 o'clock, Gerald arrived, looking surprised to find him there. "Couldn't sleep," Vincent said simply. Gerald gave him a long, knowing look. "You heard them yesterday, didn't you?" Vincent nodded. "I did. And I think it's time I stopped pretending I know what's happening here from the top floor." Gerald leaned against the counter. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I'm going back to the floor. I want to work the next few weeks like any other employee. I want to see it, feel it, understand what we've lost before we lose it all." And that's exactly what he did. The following Monday, Vincent clocked in under a fake name. Vince, just Vince, and started his first shift in years as a sales associate. Gerald had quietly informed the corporate office and swore the rest of the team to secrecy. Most of them had no idea who he really was. To them, he was just a new guy learning the ropes. The first day was a disaster. Rachel, assigned to train him, didn't hold back. Customers expect answers. "You can't just fumble through the fabric options," she said, exasperated as he clumsily explained the difference between wool blends and pure cashmere to a confused shopper. "I'm sorry," Vincent muttered, genuinely embarrassed. "Guess I'm rustier than I thought." Rachel shrugged, already moving on. Rusty's one word for it. Come on, we got fitting rooms to reset. But as the days passed, something shifted. Vincent saw firsthand the impossible pace his team was working under. Not enough staff on the schedule. Customers piling up. Lunch breaks cut short. And still, his people pushed through, smiling, hustling, making the store shine as best they could. One evening, after closing, Rachel sat at the break room table scrolling through her phone with a tired sigh. Long day? Vincent asked, peeling off his name badge. She laughed without humor. Is there any other kind? Why do you stay? He asked quietly. Rachel looked up, surprised by the question. Because I love the work. I love helping people feel like $1,000,000. And I thought this company cared, you know? But lately, I don't know. Feels like we're just cogs in a machine. Vincent nodded slowly. I get that. She smiled at him for the first time that week. Well, you're doing better than your first day, rookie. Maybe there's hope for you. Little moments like that kept him going. Over the next few weeks, Vincent stayed late helping the stock team. He covered shifts when someone called out sick. He listened to the little jokes, the whispered complaints, the proud stories of helping a nervous groom find the perfect wedding suit. And in all of it, he realized how much heart was still beating inside Hale and Company. The soul of the company wasn't gone. It was just buried under the weight of overwork and corporate neglect. But even as Vincent's appreciation for his team deepened, so did his guilt, because they didn't know who he really was. They confided in him, trusted him. Rachel even joked one night, if the real boss ever showed up, maybe he'd learn a thing or two from you. Vincent laughed, but it was hollow. The secrecy started to weigh on him, heavy and awkward. One afternoon, during a rare lull, Gerald pulled him aside. You can't keep this up forever, Gerald said. They deserve to know. Rachel, especially. She's been carrying half the store on her back. Vincent rubbed his temples. I know. I wanted to understand first. To really see what they go through. Now I do. And yeah, it's time. But he couldn't just drop the truth like a bomb. So he came up with a plan. 2 weeks later, Vincent sent out a company-wide invite for a special event at the flagship store. Mandatory attendance. Paid time. No details. The night of the event, the staff arrived to find the store transformed. Tables of catered food. Soft music. A podium set up near the entrance. Rachel nudged Vincent. Any idea what this is about? He took a deep breath. Yeah, actually I do. Before she could press him, Gerald called for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Gerald said, our CEO has a few words. Rachel blinked. Wait, the CEO is here? Vincent stepped forward, loosened his tie, and faced the people who had unknowingly become his teachers over the past month. Actually, he said, his voice clear and steady, I've been here all along. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rachel's eyes widened. Vince, she whispered. Vincent smiled gently. Vincent Hale, and I owe all of you an apology and a thank you. And as the room fell into stunned silence, Vincent realized this was only the beginning of setting things right. Silence hung thick in the air. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto Vincent, their expressions ranging from shock to confusion, and in Rachel's case, pure betrayal. You're joking, she said, voice sharp. This is some kind of sick prank, right? Vincent's stomach twisted. He had expected disbelief. He had even prepared for anger. But seeing it on their faces, seeing it in Rachel's narrowed eyes and the clenched fists of the employees who had confided in him, made it so much worse. No prank, he said, steady but soft. I've been working alongside you for weeks because I needed to see the truth for myself. And I did. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you needed to see it? That's rich. You mean to tell me you had no clue your own people were struggling? That we were breaking our backs just to keep this place running while corporate sat in their fancy offices, blind to it all? Her words stung because they were true. Vincent exhaled, forcing himself to hold their gazes. I lost sight of what mattered, he admitted. I let myself believe that as long as the company was growing, everything was fine. I read reports, I saw numbers, but I never listened. Not until now. A murmur spread through the room. Some employees exchanged uncertain glances. Others crossed their arms, skeptical. Rachel shook her head, stepping forward. And what? Now that you've played retail worker for a few weeks, you suddenly get it? You get to go back to your cushy office while we go back to barely making rent. Vincent's chest tightened. This was the moment. The moment he had to prove, not with words, but with action, that he wasn't a man they thought he was, that he was capable of change. No, he said firmly. I'm not going back to the way things were. He turned toward Gerald, who handed him a folder. Vincent opened it and held up the first document. Effective immediately, we're raising base pay for all employees. No more struggling to survive on part-time wages. Murmurs turned into gasps. He lifted another document. And starting next month, all full-time employees will receive health benefits. No more waiting years to qualify. Stunned silence. Then, a choked sound, someone holding back tears. Vincent wasn't done. I'm restructuring management. No more ridiculous cost-cutting at your expense. No more understaffed shifts while executives rake in bonuses. And every store will have an open-door policy with corporate. Your voices will be heard. The tension in the room cracked, disbelief giving way to something raw and unspoken. Hope. Rachel's lips parted, her shoulders sagging slightly. You're serious? Vincent met her gaze. Dead serious. And if I ever forget again, I expect you all to remind me. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, employees began clap. A slow, hesitant ripple that swelled into something real. Rachel's arms were still crossed, but the hard edge in her eyes softened. She studied Vincent, as if seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time. All right, she said finally, you've got a long way to go. But maybe, just maybe, you're not a lost cause after all. Vincent let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. In the weeks following the reveal, the energy inside the flagship store shifted, like the first warm breeze after a brutal winter. For the first time in years, Vincent didn't just feel like the owner of Hale & Company. He felt like part of the team. But healing trust is never instant. The morning after the announcement, Vincent arrived early again. This time, not to spy or observe, but to work. Rachel was already there, unpacking a shipment of new arrivals. She glanced up, meeting his gaze with guarded eyes. Wasn't sure if he'd actually show, she said, sliding a box cutter through the tape. I said I was serious, Vincent replied, stepping beside her to help. Besides, someone's got to keep up with you. For a beat, Rachel said nothing. Then, to his relief, she smirked. Good luck with that. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the hum of the city waking up beyond the glass storefront. It was during those quiet mornings, side by side with the team, that Vincent began to understand the depth of what he neglected. It wasn't just wages and hours. It was the unseen labor. The late nights employees spent calming anxious customers, the weekends missed with family to cover shifts, the small sacrifices made daily in service of the brand he had built. And slowly, shift by shift, he started fixing it. Company-wide listening sessions became mandatory. He sat at every single one, notebook in hand, collecting story frustrations and ideas. Promotions were reevaluated, pay scales adjusted, resources redirected toward supporting the staff instead of just marketing campaigns. Rachel, once the most vocal critic, was promoted to assistant manager within a month. She earned it, Vincent told Gerald, who couldn't have agreed more. Frankly, I'm lucky we didn't lose her. But the biggest change wasn't something that could be measured in policies or pay bumps. It was cultural. Where once employees whispered in fitting rooms, now they spoke openly during team meetings. They knew that the man at the top wasn't hiding behind reports anymore. He was on the floor, He was listening, and the customers noticed, too. There was a warmth returning to Hale and Company, an authenticity that couldn't be faked with clever branding. Repeat clients commented on it. New customers felt it the moment they walked in. Sales ticked up, sure, but more importantly, pride came back into the work. One evening, after a long but satisfying day, Rachel approached Vincent as they closed up. "You know, for what it's worth," she said, locking the door behind the last customer, "I didn't think people like you cared. I thought we were just numbers on a spreadsheet." Vincent leaned against the counter, arms crossed casually. "Honestly? So did I. Somewhere along the way, I let the business become just that, a business. But you all reminded me why I started this in the first place." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "So what now? You're not just going to vanish back to corporate, right?" He smiled. "No, I'm here to stay. Maybe not every day, but enough to make sure we never lose this again." Rachel studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. "All right, boss, let's do this right." Vincent shook her hand, feeling the weight of her trust being cautiously extended. It wasn't full forgiveness. Not yet, but it was real. And as he looked around the store, at Gerald finishing inventory in the back, at the younger employees laughing as they cleaned the counters, at the racks of suits that suddenly seemed far less important than the people who sold them, he realized something simple but profound. A company is never about the product. It's about the people. It's about the single mom working extra shifts to pay for her kids' school supplies, the college student folding shirts between classes, the retiree who stays part-time just to stay connected to something meaningful. Vincent had once thought his greatest achievement was building Hale and Company into a national brand. But now, standing in the warm glow of the closing store, he knew better. His real legacy would be the lives he helped support, the careers he nurtured, the people he refused to let become invisible. And that became the moral of the story Vincent lived every day afterward. Success means nothing if you forget the people who make it possible. From that day forward, Hale and Company wasn't just known for its luxury suits or elegant storefronts. It became known as a company that put people first. The whispers in the fitting rooms faded, replaced by laughter and pride. And Vincent Hale, the undercover boss who had once stopped cold at hearing the truth about his own company, finally understood that the greatest investment he could ever make wasn't in fabric or storefronts. It was in the people who made it all possible. And for the first time in a long time, he walked out into the night air with a heart as full as the store behind him, knowing the real work was just beginning. 1 year later, Hale and Company was nearly unrecognizable, but not because of some flashy redesign or rebranding. The transformation ran deeper than aesthetics. Employee satisfaction hit record highs, turnover plummeted, and, perhaps most telling of all, Vincent didn't need undercover shifts anymore to know how things were going. He knew because people told him, without fear, without filters. Rachel, now the store manager, led weekly check-ins with her team, where everyone, from the newest hire to senior staff, had a voice. She and Vincent worked closely on new initiatives, including a scholarship fund for employees pursuing higher education and paid volunteer days so staff could give back to their communities. It was no longer just a store. It was a place people wanted to be. And Vincent? He never returned to hiding behind corporate reports. He made it a personal rule to spend at least 1 day a week on the floor, sleeves rolled up, working alongside the very people who reminded him what leadership truly meant. Looking back, he often thought about that moment in the fitting room, the overheard conversation that cracked his world wide open. And now, every time he walked past that spot, he smiled, because sometimes it takes hearing the hardest truths to spark the most necessary change. To anyone listening, he'd say this: don't wait to be told what's broken. Go find out for yourself. Step onto the floor. Ask questions. Listen. Because the heartbeat of any business isn't measured in profits. It's measured in people. And when you invest in them, you don't just save a company. You build a legacy worth leaving behind.